So welcome everybody. We have a very special guest with us this evening at WESPAC. He's a longtime friend of WESPAC, Dr. Mazin Qumsiyeh, visiting from Palestine with his partner, Jessie Chang. They are both the co-founders of the Palestinian Institute for Biodiversity. Dr. Qumsiyeh will be talking about his work with us this evening, and I will be very happy to share this recording far and wide afterwards. So thank you both so much for traveling so far to be with us here in Westchester County. Welcome.
Thanks, Nanda. Thanks for inviting us. I spoke here a few years ago, and so much has happened since then, of course. And many of you are probably new and have not heard me speak before. How many have heard me speak? One person, so that not too redundant, hopefully. Yeah, Jessie heard me. No, it's okay. All right.
You're very soft-spoken, Dr.
So anyways, thank you. I will speak louder for the sake of the recording, at least. So I previously, Jessie and I lived in the US, and we went back to Palestine 2008, started a number of projects, and I will tell you about at least a couple of them during the course of this presentation. But I also want to tell you about what's going on in Palestine. For those of you who have been there, how many have been to Palestine? Yeah, most of you have been. Even people who live there sometimes don't really know what's going on because they tend to see confusing signals and all sorts of things. And even those who are familiar with the symptoms can confuse them for something else. So my background is also medical genetics. I was at Duke and Yale universities. Thank you. In the school medicine, teaching genetics to medical students. And I would tell medical students, also running clinical laboratory, testing, of course, is important. But in medical genetics, we say there's 5 pillars of modern medicine. Take a patient history, take current symptoms, make the right diagnosis based on those first 2 things, and on tests, of course. And 4th is you give therapy based on that. And then you give the patient what's called prognosis, what's the likelihood to happen. Same thing with social phenomena. I think you need take a little bit of patient history. Why do you need to take patient history? To understand if there's a congenital problems, maybe. Maybe they've always been fighting in the Middle East, so we don't, so it's important to take that patient history. The second is take the current symptoms, and then you go to diagnosis. Now, you can be problematical if you mix diagnosis, because no matter how good a physician you are, if you give the wrong therapy for the wrong disease, then you are really in trouble. So what's this patient? Who is this patient? The geographic area called Palestine for the past 3,500 years is a province of what's called the land of Canaan. It's in the Eastern Mediterranean at the cross-section of continents. Even humans migrated out of Africa through Palestine, and even birds today migrate from Africa and Eurasia back and forth. 500 million birds pass through Palestine. The geography and the geology and climatic history made it a very rich land in biodiversity and very fertile land. So it is not a desert. In fact, it was the first place that humans developed agriculture. Fertile Crescent, as you know, is the place of the origin of agriculture, first domestication of animals and plants. animals like goats and donkeys, and plants like wild wheat and barley and chickpeas and hummus and whatever, lentils. This happened about 12,000 years ago. And when people developed agriculture, of course, they had time on their hand. They're no longer going out every day hunting, gathering things. So they started developing things like the alphabet. The alphabet that you use here was invented by my ancestors, Aramaic-speaking Canaanitic people, who invented this alphabet that evolved into the Latin alphabet, the Arabic alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. All these things come from us. The A is, for example, from Aleph with the bullhorn. The B is from Beit, which is a house. That's why it's shaped like that. The J is from Jamal, which is a camel, etc. This is Aramaic. And the land was very fertile, very rich, never been a desert, never will be a desert unless climate change and Israeli actions make it a desert, which is likely now. But we'll see. Most Palestinians lived off of sustainable agriculture for thousands of years. 75% of Palestinians lived off of sustainable agriculture before 1948. Now it's 3 or 4%. And Palestine has always been multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious country, even multilingual, by the way. 44 languages spoken in Palestine before 1948. All right, this is the patient. This is like taking demographics of the patient, how tall he is, how old, whatever. So if we assume the patient here is 12,000 years old, has this patient always been having problems like the one we have now? And the answer is resoundingly no. Actually, one of the most peaceful countries on earth is our country. Some of you look at me like you can't be serious. This is Palestine, Israel. Yes, I mean, there's not much conflict happening there. It happened rarely, usually spaced by about a few hundred years. For example, if you take away this conflict, you'd have to go back to the Crusaders, another conflict brought to us from Europe. Europe is great at exporting conflict, by the way. But anyways, so the patient has been very healthy. There's no congenital problem in this patient. Hundreds of years, thousands of years, no problems. Occasionally they have an episode like the COVID-19, if you want, an episode. And I got the COVID-19 twice already. So that's what happened. So then the patient, we know the history, so we got the current illness. What is this current illness about? It's not very complicated to understand. Palestine, as I said, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual. And there was an idea in Europe called political Zionism. The idea was to transform Palestine to become the Jewish state of Israel, to become monolithic, to have Hebrew language, etc. This is the idea of political Zionism. It's a simple idea. It's you can understand its history if you want to delve into history and understand why, for example, it evolved only in the late 19th century. It didn't evolve before that. It's because in the 19th century, Europe was undergoing a political transformation from empires to nation states. So instead of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Spanish Empire, you have Austria, Hungary, Germany, etc. This concept of nation state in Europe was inherently discriminatory against minorities, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Jews, whether it's Gypsies, Roma people, or Protestants in majority Catholic countries, or Catholics in majority Protestant countries. The concept of nation states is inherently discriminatory. So obviously some Jews thought it's a good idea to make a Jewish state in Palestine. The problem was that Palestine was not a land without a people for a people without a land. It was very well populated by people. In fact, early Zionists who surveyed it said there's not 1 dönum or 1 acre of land that is cultivable that is not being cultivated. Okay? So you have a conundrum if you want to create a Jewish state in Palestine. What to do with the local people? So the answer was obvious, kick them out. And indeed, that's what happened. So 500 plus Palestinian villages and towns, you see them on the map on the right, were depopulated and people sent out. And Israel was created on 78% of Palestine. And in 1967, Israel occupied the rest of Palestine, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, plus, of course, the Golan Heights and the Sinai. And they had already planned it. If you want, the literature is available. It was pre-planned attack to acquire the rest of Palestine and to start building settlements. In fact, the plans for where the settlements go existed before 1967, and that's what they did. I won't go into this. Now, you're wearing this T-shirt that has a shrinking map of Palestine. Do you guys know where this map came from and how it came from? Why? Who first drew it? Was my son Danny when he saw the shrinking map of the United States in 1998, and he said, "Dad, isn't this what happened to your country?" I said, "No, son, this what happened to your country." And he said, "Shouldn't you draw a map like this for Palestine?" I said, "No, shouldn't you draw a map like this for Palestine?" So he drew it based on what he saw when he was going in middle school in Duke Middle School in North Carolina. And we printed and published this map early in 1998, 1999, and people have started using it, as you see. Don't worry, no copyright. I'm not going to hold it. Yeah. So what is the diagnosis here? The diagnosis is very simple. It's called settler colonialism. Please remember those 2 words. It is important to make the right diagnosis if you're going to treat it. You cannot make the wrong diagnosis. Now, how do good doctors debate sometimes diagnosis? How do they decide that it's the right diagnosis? And by the way, all the early Zionists for over 40 years, from the first Zionist colony in Palestine, which was Petah Tikva and Rishon LeZion, called their activities colonialism. For example, the first organization they set up to do this in 1870s was called Jewish Colonization Association. And Herzl called it colonization, and Ben Gurion called it colonization. Jabotinsky, all the early Zionists. It is not a derogatory word. It's a common phenomenon. In the 19th century, everybody was colonizing, so why not European Jews? So, but again, I repeat my question, how do we know that this is the right diagnosis? There is not the wrong diagnosis. Well, if the symptoms and the tests prove that it's right, then that's right. If they contradict the diagnosis, then there's something wrong. That's what we did in pathology conferences when I met at Yale University, for example, with other doctors looking at patients. We look at the totality of the symptoms, and one of us would say, but that symptom doesn't fit this diagnosis, right? So let's rethink it. So let me give you a very simple example, which you can use in a social context. For example, my village of Beit Sahur engaged in a revolt in 1988, where it was civil disobedience. We burned ID cards, we refused to pay taxes, and we also smuggled 18 cows. Did you hear about the fugitive 18 cows? Because the Israeli military says Palestinians cannot own milking cows. We can own milking mice, milking rats, but not milking cows. All right, then the Israeli military discovered this and told us to kill the cows within 24 hours. We negotiated for 48 hours. And then they came back 48 hours later and the cows were gone. So where is the cows? We don't know anything about any cows. So there was the fugitive cows hiding and being moved around our village. And the Israeli military started military operation. They called it Operation Hunt Cow to find these fugitive cows. Now, if you think of this story, what other diagnosis does it fit? For example, some of the other diagnoses I heard about the Israeli issue or the Zionist issue is it's a religious conflict, somehow interpretation of what God wants or something. Well, sorry, but the cows are not religious. They're not Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. Even the owners of these cows, our village was 70% Christian at the time, 30% Muslim. And we were all in on this crime of smuggling the fugitive cows. So it cannot be about religion. Can it be about military occupation? Israel is occupying the West Bank. You hear that a lot. Sorry, it doesn't fit either. I mean, Germany occupied France for many years. They didn't tell the French people, no lavash kiri, no laughing cows. You cannot have cows. So it cannot fit the military occupation. Does it fit settler colonialism? Absolutely, yes. For the same reason, these white, beautiful settlers killed millions of these things called buffaloes, Why did they kill them? It's nothing about misunderstanding linguistic issues or whatever. Clearly, they have settler colonialism. They want to do their thing. They want to recreate the country to make it the United States of America. And these natives and their food source is in the way, have to be removed. It's logical, not good, bad, or evil. I don't care if you want to use terminologies like that. That's not my terminology. It is just what it is. As a scientist, I like to describe things as they are. So today there are 15 million Palestinians. 8 million of us are refugees or displaced people. And the rest live in these shrinking Bantustans or ghettos or whatever you want to call them. If you agree to this diagnosis of settler colonialism, that's not a bad diagnosis, by the way. Why it's not a bad diagnosis? Because every country had it. There's not a single country on earth that escaped it. Perhaps the deep Antarctic regions, but that's not a country and have government. So every country had it. Every country. So you have a lot of other patients to measure with. What is the outcome of settler colonialism? There are three possible outcomes. There's the Algerian model, where 1 million French pack their bags and went to Europe. I don't say back to Europe because most of them have never even seen Europe. There were 6, 7, 8 generations in Algeria. That's a rare scenario, very bloody, by the way. 3 million Algerians killed, 150,000 French killed. That's one scenario. Second scenario is genocide of the natives, like happened in this country, or the Aborigines in Australia. That's also rare, but very few countries have. The third scenario is the most common scenario, where the descendants of the colonizers and the descendants of the colonized live in one country, post-colonialism. This happened in most of them. Latin America, for example, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, that's Central America, Colombia, etc. North America, Mexico and Canada, all of Europe, basically, many countries in Africa, many countries in Southeast Asia, which had colonization. That's the outcome. I don't know which one do you guys prefer. I prefer the third outcome, least bloody one. And most Palestinians have supported that third outcome from the beginning of the Zionist project. I can show you documents from 1880s and 1890s when Herzl came up. This is the real. There's no fourth outcome. There's not, please remove from your mind the so-called two-state solution, quote unquote. It's a two-state delusion or illusion, but it's not a solution. Never in history has a colonial, anti-colonial struggle ended up with dividing the country between the natives, the indigenous people, and the colonials. Never, and will never happen. For many reasons, I don't have time to go through them. I wrote a whole book about the subject called Sharing the Land of Canaan, which you can get it on my website free. You don't have to pay money. Again, I don't believe in copyrights, to the chagrin of my editors and Pluto Press with my books. I'm happy to share them. All right, now, so if you agree with me till this point, that's a big if. I don't want to spend too much time talking about symptoms. Symptoms are far too many, far too complicated, but the diagnosis is simple and the outcome is simple. Perhaps I will talk about one symptom, which is the environmental justice symptom, because that's not something you hear about, regardless of where you go and which side you are coming from. So the environmental issues are catastrophic globally, not just in Palestine. Palestine is especially catastrophic. Israel, by the way, dubs itself as a green country, as a country that made the desert bloom. I actually did research on the subject, published dozens of articles, research papers on this. And most recently, we have a whole monograph with 650 references that prove otherwise, prove that Israel is one of the worst countries environmentally, globally, not even in the Middle East, which has problems. Globally, of course, there's climate change, overexploitation, pollution, habitat destruction, etc., invasive species, and so on. But settler colonialism is also environmentally damaging, like when the European settlers killed these millions of buffaloes, So let me just give you a few examples. For the shortness of time, I will just focus on a couple of examples. But they are important examples because they illustrate the folly of this. When Israel destroyed these Palestinian villages that I showed you on that map, they bulldozed all the land around them, which included both domesticated trees and wild trees. Domesticated trees like almonds, figs, olives, and wild trees like hawthorn, oaks, and carobs, they bulldozed all of that. And in place of that, the Jewish National Fund, the Green Agency, planted pine trees. Now, why pine trees? For many reasons I don't have time to go through, but they grow fast, they give a European look, etc. The problem with pine trees is, of course, a monoculture. You're replacing a polyculture with a monoculture. Biodiversity is devastated at that level. So, and not only that, pine trees are susceptible to fire in a dry climate. Actually, last week, there's fires in the Galilee. And these are fires in West Jerusalem that after they consumed the pine trees, you can see the terraces got exposed. That's part of the reason, by the way, they planted pine trees, is to cover up the crime of removing the Palestinians and their agriculture. So here it exposed the terraces that Palestinians had built and had olives and other things on those terraces. There was a diversion of the water of the Jordan River from the Lake Tiberias to the west. And this diversion was devastating on both the western slopes and the eastern slopes. Now, why did they divert the water there? They call it the Israel National Water Carriers. Two reasons. One, to deprive the Jordan Valley of water, because at the time between 1948 and 1967, Israel didn't have access there. The West Bank was under Jordanian rule. The second reason is they wanted to do replacement agriculture. They didn't know how to do the rain-fed agriculture on the eastern coasts that Palestinians have engaged in for thousands of years. Rain-fed agriculture like wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas, etc. They wanted to replace that with irrigated agriculture, things like cucumbers, carrots, avocados, things like that. This is replacement agriculture, not adding, by the way, 1 acre of new agricultural land, just replacement agriculture. But what did this do to the Jordan River? You can even see it, the valley from satellite image, what it had done, desertification in the valley. The Jordan River itself went down from 1,350 million cubic meters per year. Now it's 20 million cubic meters per year. This is what it looked like before. This is what it looks like now. Basically a stream of about 2 or 3 yards in width, polluted. And of course, the Dead Sea is shrinking. By the way, it's neither dead nor a sea, but that's another story. It's an inland salty lake, and it has living forms like algae, but the algae actually, half the species of algae is now gone because of the increased salinity thanks to the diversion of the water. The surface of the Dead Sea is already less than 2/3 of where it was before this project, and desertification is coming around at an accelerated pace. On this satellite image taken from the north, I want you to see the red line is actually the line of the 400 millimeter rainfall. 400 millimeter is a lot, by the way. It's not a small amount of rainfall. And this is a recent picture. So the desert, if you want desert, it's in the Sinai here, or the southern Negev here, and Israel planted nothing there, okay? So again, this was part of the Fertile Crescent, is already green. There is nothing that Israel added in terms of agriculture. The reverse, they destroyed the environment and destroyed the plant and animal life in our region. There's another mega project that Israel did, which is to drain and dry Lake Hula and the wetlands of the Hula area. And you can see where it was before and where it is now. And these are some Palestinian women harvesting reeds from the wetlands. There were about 15 Palestinian communities around the wetlands. All of them were removed in 1948, and Israel drained these so-called swamps. They like to use that term. I don't like the word swamps. It's wetlands. Wetlands are useful for people, and they're useful for animals and plants. And 219 species of animals disappeared thanks to this action by the Israeli government. Now, Israel sets up what is called nature reserves, also bills itself as the country with the highest percentage of its land as nature reserves. When I investigated this issue, I was like, where are these nature reserves? Number one. Number two, who sets them up? Who defines their borders? This is very important questions. And number two, why do they have such large amount of land designated nature reserves? Third question. Well, in the investigation, I discovered that not one single biologist is involved in designating nature reserves in Israel. It's designated by the Jewish National Fund, which dubs on its website. The Jewish National Fund is the custodian of the land of Israel on behalf of its owners, Jewish people everywhere. So congratulations, by the way. If you're Jewish, you own the land. You own our land. Now, so why does the Jewish National Fund set up these nature reserves, for example, if you can see here in the Negev and the Galilee? Well, because that's where the remaining Palestinians remain, is to exclude the Palestinians from these areas. It has nothing to do with the value of natural areas in those areas. And the evidence for that is plenty. I can send you document after document from Israeli sources themselves, from their own statements about why they needed to designate new areas. They just designated a new nature reserve, by the way, between Ma'ala Adumim and the Dead Sea. That's to exclude the Jahalin Bedouins and Khan al-Ahmar and all of that area. Here's another piece of evidence. These are the nature reserves, so-called, in the Jordan Valley. Sorry, the colors here are not appearing like what I see them here. But there is red areas and green areas. Perhaps this one shows a little better. This is not in the Jordan Valley. This is in the South Hebron Hills. They have a nature reserve, green area. On top of it, there is the red area. What's the red area? Military training zone. Military training zone. And so if it was really about nature, they wouldn't put a military training zone in the middle of a nature reserve, okay? And this is what they do in the South Hebron Hill, regularly. And at the same time, they arrested these kids for picking wild oregano in this so-called nature reserve, because the kids are destroying nature by picking a few wild oreganos. So the kids are destroying nature, but this is not destroying nature, okay, in this hills. And of course, they destroy the schools in the South Hebron Hills because the Israeli High Court just ruled that they can remove all the Palestinian residents of the South Hebron Hills and continue to expand Jewish settlements in those areas, Jewish-only colonies, I should say. I like the term colonies rather than settlements. The idea is to exclude Palestinians and build for Jewish communities. And there are many nature reserves where I can actually show you on the Israeli map that the settlement is being built in the middle of what's called a nature reserve. Now, there is in Israel two entities in the government. One was called the Nature Reserve Authority and one was called the National Park Authority. They merged them in 1968 into the National Park and Nature Reserve Authority. National parks is another interesting phenomenon. National parks are used also to exclude Palestinians. For example, you probably heard about problems of Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan, right? Interesting, those areas are national park areas. What is the definition of national park according to the Zionist regime? It is areas that are of historical importance to humans, historical or religious significance areas. So the area around Jerusalem, all the area around Jerusalem is of historical and religious significance to humans. Now, who are these humans, of course? Not the Palestinians who live there. The humans is considered Jewish. Palestinians are subhuman, they're not human. So their homes can be demolished, they can be ethnically cleansed. And at the same time, in these same religious, supposedly significant areas, you see Israeli settlements like in Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan growing 4- or 5-story buildings with infrastructure of roads and everything else. After all, those are the humans that the religious significance is about, not the Palestinians and their livelihood. So my students research this, I research it, we publish a lot on this. For example, here's a paper from one of my master's students on the genotoxic effect of the Israeli industrial settlements, which dump their toxic waste on the Palestinian communities. This causes DNA damage, chromosome breaks, leads to increase in cancers, congenital birth defects, infertility, skin disorders, etc. Now, there's the use of natural resources. Of course, maybe you know about water. Israel uses 95% of the Palestinian water in the West Bank, and they even charge us for the amount they allow us. And they charge us about 8 times more than they charge Israeli settlers for water. This is our water, they steal it and they use it basically. There's the theft of Palestinian other natural resources like gas. Now, the reason Gaza is besieged has nothing to do with Hamas or rockets from Gaza or anything else. It has strictly to do with this gas fields off of Gaza, which now Israel is exporting to Europe to replace Russian gas going to Europe because of the Ukrainian war. The evidence of this is very simple to extract and understand. For example, why don't the Israelis allow Gaza fishermen to go more than 6 miles to fish? What is it about 6 miles? That's a magical number, you know? Well, at 7 miles is the beginning of these gas fields. So it had nothing to do with these fishermen being dangerous at 7 miles and not dangerous at 6 miles, nautical miles we're talking about. So it is what it is, and you can investigate these things. This is near my town of Beit Sahur, Jabal Abu Ghnaim, which my relatives owned land in the valley next to it. The land was confiscated. This was the only forested area between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And this again is the country that dubs itself as a green country. What they did with this hill where I used to go before 1997, catch butterflies and watch birds. This is what it is now, a concrete jungle, Jewish-only colony. So this is continuing the destruction of our lands. Now, I depressed you enough. So let's talk about therapy and prognosis. We talked about prognosis. We do a lot of activities. For example, I'm a member of Rotary Club, where we do a lot of humanitarian other aid to the Palestinian communities. For example, for children, these are orphan children. We worked in Gaza with the women in Gaza to help them with community health and nutrition. You know, we trained 30 community health activators who benefited 4,500 women, and 1,400 children under the age of 5 years got better nutrition thanks to our activities. These are just some pictures of some of the beneficiaries in Gaza. This was done with the help of a Rotarian club from Japan. We delivered baby equipment, neonatal care equipment to Caritas Baby Hospital. And when COVID hit, we delivered PCR machines and other equipment for testing for the West Bank. For a while, there was a problem with getting equipment. And then we applied pressure on the Israeli government to allow the import of this equipment. And some Israeli doctors actually helped us in pressuring the Israeli government, because I told them, you know, there's no sense in us vaccinating our people and letting them be tested and not have the Palestinians, because the Palestinians and Israelis are intermixed anyway, so it doesn't really make sense. And then we gave needy family support. For example, here in May 2020, we installed water coolers at schools. These filter water and produce clean, cold water for Palestinians. In 35 schools, and now we want to expand it to 120 schools if we have the funding for it. This is delivering Christmas gifts to some children that are needy. We started a community garden actually also with the Rotary Club, where children from the refugee camp, they can come and plant things, grow things. The other institute I work with besides the Rotary is this institute, which Jessie and I started in 2014. And we have since we started with our own money. We donated $250,000 to Bethlehem University. And we are full-time volunteers at this institute. For the past 9 years, we worked 7 days a week, 14, 15 16 hours a day at it as volunteers. The Institute, as the name implies, is about sustainability of human and natural communities. And we have different sections within this institute. We welcome you to come visit it. There's a museum of natural history. There's an ethnography center. There's a biodiversity center. There's a botanic garden, eco garden. There's that community garden I mentioned. There's molecular labs, animal rehabilitation units, etc. In Bethlehem, it's part of Bethlehem University. So here are some pictures of this place. So we have this part of the Museum of Natural History, this part of the ethnography exhibit, which shows tangible and intangible cultural heritage that our Canaanitic ancestors who developed agriculture used. And actually my grandparents used this equipment. So this is the aquaponic system on the top where we grow fish and vegetables. At the same time, we even brought some people from Gaza and showed them how to build these systems, which because Israel took most of our land, most of our water, these systems work nicely with limited water and limited land to produce vegetables and fish. We work with women cooperatives to basically market their products, make products like, here they're learning to make even cosmetic products from organic material from plants that they grow. We work with children, marginalized communities, women, children, remote villages, refugee camps. Thousands benefit from our services every year. These are just some of our activities with the children. This is, by the way, a mobile unit, mobile educational center, mobile museum, which we take to the remote villages like the South Hebron Hills. Even that school I showed you that was demolished, we took this mobile unit to them, and also to Khan al-Ahmar for the Bedouin communities there. We believe in working with children that we create an environment for their growth. We don't teach them really, we just create an environment of learning. And by doing, by feeling, by touching things, they learn. This is actually from last week. Children were learning about baby hyenas, because we got for our animal rehabilitation unit 5 baby hyenas that were rescued. They were going to be sold for body parts. Some people are superstitious. They think hyena parts have magical properties, aphrodisiac or whatever. So anyway, we rescued these hyenas and we are raising them in the center, in the animal rehabilitation center. This is one of our volunteers showing kids hyenas.
Where is she from?
So this one is from Germany. But we had volunteers from more than 45 countries, and we welcome you if any of you want to volunteer. We provide room and board to volunteers, and not indefinite. Israelis won't allow you anyway. They give you a visa for 3 months. So most volunteers come for 3 weeks to 3 months. We did get some volunteers longer, but they can't come back, or we have an Israeli volunteer. Of course, you don't have to worry about the visa. Zohar lived with us for 2 years at the center, which throws, tells the lie they tell us that Palestinians cannot live with Jews, Christian, Muslim, Jews cannot live together. Anyway, this is some of our student children activities. You can see how proud this kid is, having picked olives and pickled them. And all these kindergarten kids learning about butterflies and even dressed as a butterfly here to learn what butterflies need. these are just some of our volunteers and staff working in the facilities like the herbarium, the molecular lab, the taxonomy lab, etc. We have many partners from around the world, including, by the way, we did get a grant from National Geographic Society, the first grant ever given to Palestinians. We have partnership with the Natural History Museum in London, with the EU, with others. We are part of Extinction Rebellion, which works against climate change. You probably heard Greta Thunberg and those guys. So we lobby about that. And we are also trusted as consultants for the state of Palestine. I should say, quote unquote, state of Palestine. We don't have the real state, but they like to think of themselves as a state. We're under occupation, of course. Israel controls every aspect of our lives. Although we have quote unquote ministers, like a minister of transportation. The minister of transportation cannot go from one place to another without a permit from the Israelis. And our president cannot even flush his toilet if the Israelis don't allow water to go to his residence. But anyways, be it as it may, and I criticize the state of Palestine, so to speak, and the Palestinian Authority. You can talk about that if you want. But nevertheless, they trusted us with some major things like redesigning the protected areas in the West Bank to reflect nature reserve value. And we did this with the International Union of Conservation of Nature based on IUCN criteria. And that's the first time it's done in historic Palestine. As I said, the other nature reserves are not established based on IUCN or Convention Biological Diversity criteria. They're set up for political purposes. We also set up a new national biodiversity strategy and action plan for Palestine to ensure sustainability of the human and natural communities in Palestine. We have many keys to our success, including people, most importantly, people, volunteers, support, donations from people like you. We welcome donations, by the way. And you are welcome to come visit us. Here are some pictures of visitors who enjoyed visiting with us, or workers enjoying the work, producing change in our society. These are just some volunteers, for example, picking olives there, or making apricot jam, or working in the garden. And here, again, working in the garden or doing taxidermy. This group of volunteers here, they built this biogas unit within one day. And this is Zohar, an Israeli volunteer who stayed with us 2 years. She's now living in Germany.
What?
Any organic produce, all the bread, peels of potatoes, anything organic. The bacteria digest it and they produce gas that you can cook on. So there are lots of things that people can do, So what we do is we don't even think there's a box. We think it's an imaginary box. So I wrote a chapter in a book on post-colonialism, if you're interested, about mental colonization and liberation from mental colonization. Because in my humble opinion, Palestinians need to liberate their mind from the infection of Zionist colonization, which is more dangerous than the physical barriers and the walls and everything. It's the mental colonization that's preventing us from succeeding. And one of the volunteers who came, she and I just submitted the paper follow-up on that, because that paper was talking about mental colonization of the Palestinians. So now I submitted a paper that talks about mental colonization of the privileged Israelis and how they are thinking, why they are thinking the way they are thinking, how to break that impasse. If you want, again, I'm happy to share these things with you. Our dreams are big. This is what the Institute will look like in a couple of years if you come. A new building. We raised about 2/3 of the money we need for that. So any and all donations would be appreciated. Small donations, large donations. It helps. This is what it will look like from behind the elevator. This is the layout of the whole complex of buildings that will be there. This is our, what do you call this thing when you have a logo? The logo is the sunbird, the Palestine sunbird. This is the smallest bird in Palestine. Our motto is respect. First, respect for ourselves. As Palestinians, we can change our circumstances. Second is respect for other human beings, regardless of their religion or background. And third, respect for the animals and plants that share this beautiful planet with us. These three levels of respect are, of course, interconnected, and we have to work to, as I said, starting with the first level of respect. This is our website, PalestineNature.org, and there is a, where is your QR code? If you are tech savvy, I'm not. You can scan the QR code and leave us your email, or you can email me at info@palestinenature.org. I am happy to answer any questions or comments or whatever you want to make. This is, by the way, a picture of me being arrested a few times. Yeah.
I want to come here so people can hear me.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that Extend, and there's so many trips organized for the American Jewish youth to go and visit Israel, I think this is a golden opportunity for Palestinian youth to visit the homeland and to come for a trip to visit the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity. Have you entertained that in a sort of more serious way, that you would have lots of groups every year? Do you have the capacity to organize?
Yeah, we have the capacity to organize tours, and we would love to do it. We had American Palestinian young people come and spend time with us, but not in an organized fashion. Maybe this could be a project for WESPAC to organize with us. We'd be more than happy to do that.
All right.
But not just Palestinian Americans,
I know.
any American.
Any person, but I'm
You want to
thinking
do it?
for young Palestinians who have never been to the homeland, it's a wonderful opportunity. And also what I'm thinking, so for us to give a donation, there's a Maryland fiscal sponsor. If you want either to give directly to Maryland, or if you want to give here in one way, if you want to give to WESPAC and then we make one big donation to them, that's also doable. But I definitely would like us to make. There's a Maryland site that is a fiscal sponsor. So you could either get your donation directly to Maryland, or you could give to WESPAC. Yes, I will add on, and then you'll give a nice contribution. You could donate on Venmo to WESPAC. It's at WESPAC Foundation on Venmo, or you could do website, westpac.org, but just make sure you put Mazin. Mazin, so I know what it's for.
This is the hyena cups if you want to see what hyena babies
You
look
want
like.
the hyenas?
Yeah.
Are hyenas native to Palestine?
Yes. They're cute.
What can I was curious, Mazin, you mentioned there before Zionism there were 41 languages in Palestine. What are some of the languages that were there?
Well, many Syriac, Ethiopian, the Circassian, uh, you know, I can send you a list.
Yeah, please do, because it's the first time I'm hearing that there were so many.
Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic. Yeah.
Square of Gaza. Can you talk at all about like
The gas,
the toll? No, I guess I've been told about Israel polluting that water
the Mediterranean Sea?
with sewage. Well, more specifically, dumping like on the.
I talked about the diversion of the water of the Jordan River from the north towards the western areas, towards the coastal areas. That's for replacement agriculture. So irrigation replaces rainfed agriculture. That's what Israel has done. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about pollution? Yeah, I mean, this is also environmental injustice issues that we work with. Let me just give you an example. Israel prevented Palestinians from building sewage treatment facilities in the West Bank. The only time they said we will allow you to build sewage treatment facilities is if you agree to treat also the sewage of the settlers, the colonial settlers in the West Bank. In the Gaza Strip, it's another problem. In the Gaza Strip, they don't want really the Gaza people to have equipment, material, cement, pipes, because they say that's their excuse that these are all dual use items. For example, concrete, you can build a tunnel with the concrete under the border. Whatever, iron beams, you can build whatever you can build. You can make rockets with metals, whatever. But what does this do? It makes Gaza an environmental catastrophe. The Gaza is basically horrible environmentally. For example, the sewage of Gaza is dumped into the sea. And with the currents, by the way, coming up from the Suez Canal and so forth, the sewage of Gaza runs up the coast. And literally, Israelis in Jaffa and Tel Aviv are swimming in the shit of Gaza because their government has policies that try to break the will of the Palestinian people.
But that's poetic justice.
Maybe.
You should make them drink it.
As a biologist, no, I say it's not. I don't care much about as that. I care about the fish and other things in the Mediterranean. There's a catastrophe happening in the Mediterranean coastal areas. There's invasive fish species now that are invading, that are able to live in water that has more phosphates and more pollutants, while the native fish are disappearing at an accelerating pace. So I think there's all sorts of issues, as I said, big issues. And we really need to pay attention to them, and nobody's paying attention to them because the politics dominates everything. And Israel determines everything by politics. In 1997, by the way, you remember that hill I showed you that was forested between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, Har Homa now is settlement of Har Homa. I wrote to Israeli environmental groups, including Society of Protection of Nature in Israel, SPNI, including other organizations. And I asked them, why can't you lobby against this? This is not healthy. They shrugged their shoulders. They never responded to me. because they cannot go against the policy of their government, which has the Zionist agenda as number one. So they wanted to finish the ring of settlements around Jerusalem. And this hill was the only hill that's not occupied in the hills around the old city of Jerusalem. So they wanted it. This is the mentality they think of. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting about this nation. Israel also dubs itself as on the forefront of desalination. First, I, as a biologist, I tell you, I studied desalination. Desalination is not the answer to water issues. And we don't have any shortage of water, by the way. In our country, we have no shortage of water. We have, I showed you the 400 millimeter high. You go a little bit north, you get 600, you get 800 millimeter, which is more than what you get in London, for example, in rainfall. So we have no shortage of water coming from the sky. What we have is unequal distribution and mismanagement because of the Zionist ideas and political considerations, as I said. You know, in Bethlehem, which is the shepherd's field where I live, and Bethlehem, where I work, Bethlehem University, water is cut off on us regularly, for weeks sometimes. While our neighbors, so to speak, Tekoa and El David, Israeli settlements built right in the middle of Bethlehem district, they have water parks and they have green lawns in the so-called Judean desert. By the way, it's, it's not a desert. It's semi-arid region. It gets 400, 500 millimeters rain. But you cannot have water parks and swimming pools while people are literally thirsty, cannot take a bath because they don't have water. If you go there, by the way, next time, if you haven't noticed, you can distinguish Palestinian houses from Israeli houses in the same area, like Bethlehem. How can you distinguish them? By the water tanks on top of the house. Palestinian houses have water tanks. Why? Because we get water at the whim of the Israeli government, so we have to store it. Whereas Israeli houses, Israeli settler houses, don't need that because they get 24 hours, 7 days a week, water never interrupted. So this is the inequality aspect, the injustice aspect, not the aspect of shortage of water. I don't think we need desalination plants. For example, I think if Israel retains the 1,350 million cubic meters per year that flow in the Jordan Valley, that alone would be enough to water the West Bank and feed the West Bank and everything else. And to go back in the coastal areas and plant things like the rain-fed agriculture that the land was used to and the agriculture that we were used to, like lentils and chickpeas. I mean, Israel now calls it Israeli hummus even. This is bizarre for me. Israeli hummus. And I'm like, but you have killed the cultivation of hummus. They have killed the cultivation of hummus. Palestinians are the ones who used to cultivate hummus. Now Israel imports the beans, the hummus. This is bizarre for me. Why do you want to do that and export avocados? Are you a tropical country? You want to export avocados? It's ridiculous. So it makes no sense environmentally, it makes no sense agriculture-wise, it makes no sense. It does make sense only on one level, which is the political level, which is that we want this country and we don't want the people who come with this country. As simple as that.
Well, on that note, please help me thank Dr. Qumsiyeh.
You too.
Jessie, would you like to say anything before we?
Yeah, we
before
need
we
Jessie
close
to
off
say
the-
something. Especially since my voice was
Let me- I'll-
going,
what I'll
I'm
do
too
is-
tired.
I'll switch this off.
You
because-
can tell them about other aspects. Jessie is, by the way, our volunteer director. She manages the volunteers. So if you want to volunteer,
Come
talk
so
to
that the
her.
people on the Zoom can see you, Jessie. Or we can move the laptop.
This way.
Okay.
You'll move that chair over.
Yeah. You want to sit down
Okay.
or stand?
Okay, I will talk about volunteer. So on our website, there's a page for volunteer. And there's some information about what kind of work there is that we need help with or people can contribute. Also, there's a link to a form. You can apply. You must apply. And then because we got application from different sources. So in the application, you need to tell us which period you're planning, you're available. So we will see at the same period whether we have reached the maximum number that we can accommodate. And also you will attach your CV or resume or skills, whatever that your expertise. And then we will have a Zoom interview if we have availability. And then we discuss further. And then we will schedule for the volunteer from application till actual they arrive. There's lots of communication in between. So it takes a lot of time just to handle, just to arrange this volunteer. And while they are at the institute starting volunteer, we have a orientation, to teach them, to tell them all the rules and how to do certain things and oriented about what all the institute activities. And then they also, the volunteers are going to rotate making lunch for all the volunteers. So we have lunch together, all the volunteers, and then breakfast and dinner, they can have their own arrangement. Cooking, we have 2 kitchens and we supply basic things so they can make their own arrangement for the breakfast and dinner. Or some of the volunteers, they like to, maybe occasionally they wanted to go out for dinner, or there's some local social activities they wanted to participate. So they're free to do that. We only require 6 hours per day and for 5 days, so total 30 hours a week. So you have 2 days off per week. And in our accommodation, we have 4 rooms, guest rooms available right now.
Is it on the campus?
It is in the same our museum building right now. So, and actually, this future museum space is an existing building, an old building. We are renovating inside and adding elevator access for to comply with the American Disability Act. And so, and then maybe some of the railing and the handicap ramps out around. So it's because it's an old building, which was actually a Catholic sisters convent because the university is a Catholic university. Renovation an existing building actually cost much more than building from scratch. So that is our financial steps we apply. Some of the funding is from USAID, so which is from the American Publics. So congratulate for all of you. You're contributing to some of this project, and the other part of the funding it's from a Palestinian philanthropist, and so we're still short of maybe about a 30% of the total budget. So that is the renovation of the new space, and you can see the existing exhibition, natural history part of the exhibition is on that banner, and you see the insect specimens and some of the mammal specimen, bird specimens. So it's in a hall less than this, smaller than this room. So we hope to have a more exhibition space once that renovated space is finished. And this contract, the work already started, just started. So it will last about 1.5 years, 1.5 years to 2 years. So the project must be finished by September 2025, which was the required conclusion date by the USAID. So we're hoping to have a maximum in 2 years. We'll have a much modern, more special exhibition for benefiting the Palestinian and visitors from wherever they are. And one of the work that, if you come visit the museum, you will see me mostly wearing like a work clothes. There's a lot of garden work and feeding the chicken and rabbits. And now there is a special care of the hyena cubs, and also gardening. There's using your hand. You get your hands dirty. A lot of work. Get your hands dirty, and there's taking care of a warm compost, earthworm compost, and doing the regular compost, and you will discover that those things, if you do it correctly, they will not smell, and they're actually very nice to touch and work with your hand, and it's pretty rewarding to see there's no waste generated. So in our living situation at the museum, our principle is generate zero waste. So all the organic things, it goes to all various types of composting. For example, go to biogas digester, regular compost, traditional compost, warm compost, and goes to the animals. So the chicken give us eggs, and our aquaponic system growing vegetable and fish in the one systems, and so you get fish and you get vegetables, and there's 2 growing seasons. So we were growing different things for the summer and for the winter. And there's a lot of harvesting involved. So some of the work that the volunteers will do is doing the harvest and help with the gardening and taking care of all the living ecosystem. And we also have beehives. While we are on tour last week, our beekeeper, who's also one of the team member, he's he also knows how to keep bees. So he has been taking care of bees besides his regular work. And they were harvesting honey, and I do not know how much honey, but
At
maybe
least
you know
20 kilos.
at least 20 kilos of honey. And so, and also for the olive oil, olive harvest season is in late October through early November. Last year we have a pretty good harvest, and we have a lot of surplus olive oil. So all the olive oil, we don't have to buy any oil. So all the volunteers, you know, they consume the olive oil that was generated, and also now there's honey and the organic crops from the garden. So we try to live, you know, also we harvest all the kitchen gray water. So any water in the sink, we always have a bucket. So you collect the water, and then the water goes to irrigate the plants. And so we're pretty conscious about all the resources. So that is what
We have to congratulate Jessie because she just got her Palestinian green card.
okay.
It was 16 years, by the way, held by Israel, family reunification.
And
16
she's the
years.
only Chinese ethnic Palestinian green card.
No, there are a couple of others. If you want.
Maybe the only one from Taiwan, but there are
Oh,
some
okay.
there are some people from mainland Chinese.
Really?
Yes, yes. Yeah, in terms
We
of
even
the,
have 2 Chinese restaurants in Bethlehem.
yeah, about the family reunification, we applied even before I went to Palestine, 1 year before I went to Palestine, because he's planning for us to live in the West Bank. So Mazin has already filled out all the applications, sent in the application. Then once I got there, the routine is you enter as a tourist, and then you get an initial 3 months tourist visa. And a month before that visa about to expire, I can renew as a spouse without leaving. And we can do that for 22 years. For 2 years. But in the beginning, in the first few years, each time we get 12-month extension. So I only need to renew twice. After that, I must leave the country and come back to start the process again, 3 months, and then renew. And then 4 or 5 years after that, Israel changed the policy. So the maximum they give you renewal is 6 months, which means it's double the times I have to renew. So I will have to renew 4 times during this period. Then I need to exit country. So each time renewal, it takes money. And so we always, also another thing is when uncertainty of when you come back,
if they would allow you or not.
yeah, whether whether they let you in or not. And every time you come back, you always get automatically wait for several hours. And so this is the time, because you are not certain you are able to permanently stay there. A lot of things you cannot really plan for long term. So, and waited for a very long time. And a lot of people like my situation. There is a many nationality. They have the spouse, Palestinian spouse from all nationalities, and we're all in the same boat. And everybody was waiting and uncertainty, and especially during the COVID. During COVID, you're not able to have those normal process. So they say if you are leaving, you have to leave because visa expired, or you have to leave and for some travel for some reason, and you must apply to re-enter ahead of immediately after you exit. You need to apply to re-enter, and you must wait at least 45 days and to wait for your permit to re-enter, and then 45 days is like minimum. And so a lot of people left, and they did not get the permit to re-enter more than 2, 3, 4 months. And for a lot of people, it was a really severe hardship because they have young children or children in the school, or for various reasons, or people don't have any houses outside Palestine. So it's difficult for if you have to leave outside for several months, where you're gonna live, stays, and so pretty hardship. So without that permanent residency card, it has been a really difficult situation. That's the family reunification that this Israeli are not giving like
Now, mind
other
you,
countries.
if you are an Israeli Jewish person, and you marry somebody from abroad, you have no problem. You get automatic citizenship. Even if you don't have a spouse, if you're Jewish from abroad and you come, you get automatic citizenship. This is the nature of discrimination.
Yes,
When
Steve?
you have to leave
Yeah.
Israel, Palestine, you have to establish, like, do you have to go back to Taiwan, or can you just,
I can go to any countries outside.
as long as you're
Yeah.
outside of that?
As you go outside, and usually you probably 2 weeks or more, instead of immediately 1 day or something come back. So probably better to stay outside for a week or more. And I usually use that time to do some international travel, because I during this 27 months, okay, 2 years plus the initial 3 months. So it's the 27 months period. During this period, my visa is only single entry. So I do not travel outside, even to Jordan, because if I travel, then my visa will be canceled. So I will have to start over. So my practice was stay put for 27 months. And then I will do some international travel, go visit my families in Taiwan, or visit our son in the US. So that is the planning like that. But now, because I have this permanent residency, which is must be approved by Israel, I can leaving, go to Jordan and come back every time, and without any restriction like I used to have to subject to. So that's why I can easily travel with Mazin.
Wonderful.